Welcome to RT3D. My name is Alan, and in this week's video I'll be painting this marvellous sculpture of Ghost in the Shell by MCM3D. This model is available from the Patreon page of MCM3D. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but I do subscribe to them. I'll leave a link in the description below. One of the first things I do is to repair the gaps in the model that are produced in the process of 3D printing. It's really difficult to get all the surfaces absolutely flat, so I tend to leave the supports on sides where it won't matter so much. I then filled in the gaps with Funkycool's UV putty and smoothed it over with a silicone spatula. Once I'm happy with the level of the putty, I cure it with a UV pen and I start sanding down with a dab of water to help the sanding process. Next, I mix up a batch of 5-minute 2-part epoxy glue to join the two parts together. This is held together with an elastic hairband until it's hardened. For the process of filling in the gaps on the figure, I use the same resin that I used for the printing of it, but put it into a squeezy bottle with a metal tipped applicator. I run this along the gaps and then harden it with a UV pen. This can take a few passes until I'm happy with the levels. I then wet sand the parts to produce a nice smooth finish over the join. It's really important to make sure that there are no bits of dirt or sand left under the sandpaper, otherwise you're just going to be scraping large circles into it. So keep the water on the sandpaper and rinse the sculpt regularly. Onto the large neon sign now, and I cut the panel out of the back of the sign to allow me to incorporate LEDs into the inside. It's really important to wear a proper face mask with proper filters for this, as it creates a huge amount of resin dust, and that's really not good to be breathing that stuff in. I cut out the panel, as you can see here, and I'm now testing the LED with a remote control for it. Once again, I wet sanded the model down, as this helps to reduce the amount of resin dust that gets kicked up into the air. It also helps the smooth sanding process of the part. I used an old toothbrush to remove any residue that gets stuck into the parts and gets left behind. Now you might be wondering why I'm painting the clear resin parts with Vallejo black. That's a bit odd, isn't it? This is because I want every part of the outside of the sign to hide the LED light from the inside. I'll rub down the flat surface of the text later so that the light shines through only the text. This leaves an opaque surface that also helps to diffuse the light and make it appear more uniform. For the base of the model, I wanted it to look like concrete and plaster that had been weathered by the rain, so I painted it with a base of Army Painter Dungeon Grey and painted the metal parts with Scale 75's Thrash Metal. That's a great name for a metal paint. I painted the metal pipe with a 50-50 mix of Pro-Acryl Black Brown and Vallejo Bright Bronze to give it a nice metallic look, and then painted the top of the concrete slab with an Army Painter Ash Grey to give it a nice lighter grey appearance. This helps to break it up from the rest of the grey and make it a bit different. Now, I deliberately left some parts of the resin filler a bit rough and ready as I wanted to make this the basis for the plaster work. I painted an Army Painter Filthy Cape Grey to make it stand out from the uniformity of the rest of the wall. I then dabbed the wall surface with a damp sponge of Vallejo Burnt Umber to help break up the expanse of plain grey and make it look a bit dirtier. When I saw this model, I knew I wanted to try something a bit different, so I printed off one of her forearms in clear resin to replicate the effect when she uses her invisibility camouflage. Here I give it a layer of gloss varnish to make it more transparent. This is what happens when you overfill the airbrush cup. So I emptied out the paint and gave the head a zenithal highlight with Vallejo Dead White. I then went over the rest of the body parts of the model with the same Vallejo Dead White and sprayed from the direction light would generally be hitting her from above. The Major's bodysuit from the film is a very pale shade of a skin tone mixed with grey, so I painted the whole of her body parts with a mixture of Miskatonic Grey and Prue Pink. There are panels of a more lighter grey shade that will get paintbrushed later. I then used a heavier Prue Pink shaded mix to spray over the masked off areas of her body parts and to add more pink into her suit. For the lighter body panels on the chest, neck, arms and legs, I used a single pass of Miskatonic Grey from scale 75 with a paintbrush. I returned to paint the knees, feet and elbow joint patches with a slightly darker version of the pink grey combo mixed with some Vallejo Salmon Rose. I also used this colour combo to paint the fingers on her right hand. For the gun holster on her left leg, I painted it a lighter shade by mixing Miskatonic Grey and Vallejo White. And I painted her fingernails with a little dab of Prue Pink on each finger. For the weapon in her hand, I found that it was actually supposed to be semi-transparent, so I painted some parts the same colour as her suit, and the centre part I painted a combination of Vallejo's UK Azure Blue and Pale Blue Grey. I wanted to emphasise the panel lines in her suit, so I broke out the dark grey panel line by Vallejo and dabbed it along each and every indented panel line on the body parts. To help sell the idea of invisible camouflage, I used Vallejo's Metallic Medium, which is a clear coat with little flecks that make any finish look like metal flake, and I sprayed that over the clear resin arm. I'll use that over the whole suit later. I used a light shading of Intensity White over the whole body to highlight the areas that were lit by a high light source such as daylight. This was done in very fine applications in several layers until I liked how it looked. To add some dark shadow to the suit, I used Citadel's Nuln Oil and applied it only to the dark areas where you would expect to see shadows. I then followed that up with a light pass of Metal Medium over the entire suit to give it a high-tech sparkly appearance. I covered the base with some kitchen film to prevent any overspray going onto it whilst it held the figure securely. For her left forearm, I wanted to give it the impression of her gradually transitioning to invisibility, so I glued it in place and painted over the join with Miskatonic Grey, Prue Pink and Metal Medium. Next up was the skin tones, and as usual I started with the base layer of Warlord Purple and followed that with an application of transparent red from a low angle to accentuate the shadowy areas. The first of the skin shades is next with a layer of basic skin tone by Vallejo. This should be applied thin enough that the undertones still affect the finish. I then applied a top-down layer of Vallejo's Prue Pink to add highlight back into the skin tone, and then a light layer of Orcish Dermis from a shadow direction to add some warmth back into the skin shade. To lessen the pinkish nature of the skin colour, I added a thin pass of Vallejo's Flat Flesh tone, which was thinned down with a fair bit of water to lessen the speed at which it coloured the skin. And finally, a pass of Vallejo Light Flesh to add a little highlight back into her skin colour. The Major's lip colour is a fairly restrained and natural colour, so I painted it with a mixture of Vallejo Salmon Rose and Scale 75 Orcish Dermis. For the eye sclera, the white of the eye, I painted it with an Army Painter's Brain Matter Beige. That's closer to the real eye shade than a pure white, which would be really odd. I wasn't too happy with the result of the lip colour, so I decided to darken it down a bit with a mix of Vallejo's Salmon Rose with a hint of transparent red mixed in. I then added a highlight of Vallejo Brown Rose to the lip shape to help define them. I used a mixture of Vallejo Black and Hull Red, which is a dark brown colour, to paint the eyelashes and eyebrows. I used a trusty nail art brush for this as it has a very pointy tip that also holds a nice amount of paint. This enables me to paint in all the fine details far better than any other brush that I own. These can be found in my description below if you're looking to buy them. Once I have the facial skin tones finished, I can finally attach the front part of the hair to her head and fix the join mark where, with the same process I used for the leg gaps. I applied a thin line of liquid resin and then UV cured it with a UV pen light. I then painted the hair with a Pro Acro Coal Black paint as its base coat. For her eye colour, I painted the large iris shape with a dark green paint from Vallejo called Gunchip Green. I then used the Vallejo Pale Green for the highlight areas of the iris before a dab of black for the pupil and another dab of pure white for the specular highlight in her eyes. And I finished off the eyes with a final application of gloss varnish to give them a nice wet glossy look. And I finished off her hair with a dry brush of a mixture of two purple paints, Citadel's Magos Purple and Vallejo's Warlord Purple for an extra kick to the shade. I decided to darken down the plaster effect on the base as I wanted to depict it as a scene at night, so I gave the grey finish a going over with Citadel's Wildwood contrast paint just to darken it down. I added to the darkening of the plaster with an application of Army Painter Necromancer Grey, as I wanted to make it look like rain dirt washed down over the building over time. The metal pipe on the base was needing a little pick-me-up, so I gave it a dry brush with Vallejo's Metallic Rust just to add a little bit of interest in so it wasn't so one colour. I gave the metal plate on the base a similar dry brush, this time with Vallejo's Chainmail Silver to help pick out highlights, and then added Burnt Umber to add rust and dirt to the plates. I added in some small detail lights to the base and painted them white first, before going over with the Vallejo Bloody Red to make sure that they were brighter than if they were just painted over dark grey. To give the plaster a bit more detail, I gave it a dry brush with Army Painter's Ash Grey to bring out the edge detailing and to emphasise the broken plaster parts. I gave the base underhangs a darkening with Citadel's Siger Brown to give it a dirtier look. On the backboard for the sign, I wanted to let the LED light stand out, so I painted an area around the light with a few coats of Vallejo Black to hide any light bleed from the inside. There were a couple of small detail parts on the sign that I wanted to give some attention to, so I painted the coiled cable parts with a Vallejo Bright Bronze and then added little red light squares to the panel with Vallejo Bloody Red. I then used a small sponge to dab highlights over the broken concrete to edge paint it in an organic manner with Miskatonic Grey, and then added dirt and grime to the sign with application of Citadel's Nuln Oil and then Dark Oath Flesh to make it look weather beaten. Here I'm just looking to add shadows underneath each of the characters and in the sign in general, and to leave rain-washed dirt from underneath each of the elements. I sanded down the front face of each of the characters after this and then applied a light layer of satin varnish, and with that I'm calling it done. And I just once again want to thank the good folks at Funcrico for supplying the resins for this project. It always produces fantastic results and has very low odour, which is really important to me as I work in the same room as my printer. To each and every viewer and subscriber, thank you so much. I truly appreciate every comment and always try to answer any questions. So it only remains for me to ask that if you like what you see here, why not check out my other videos and leave a like and subscribe. So this has been R2-3D, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.